Hi, this is Betty with Beyond the Dalet. I've been talking about the Hebrew letter Dalet, so we've been doing a series on the Dalet. And so far, I've talked a lot about the process that is contained, the mystical element that is embedded within the Dalet of being transitioned from one state of being to another. And that's a major part of the Dalet, or at least from my perspective it is, because I believe that kind of defines the basic concept of that. But there's more to the Dalet than just that. And today I want to talk a little bit about the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, which is in Hebrew they refer to it as the Odiot. And there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and Dalet is the fourth letter. And there's a rabbi by the name of Lawrence Kusher he wrote a book several years ago, 15, 20 years ago, about the name of the book is called The Book of Letters, a mystical alphabet. And in there he makes the statement that the letters, the Hebrew letters, they're more than just signs for sounds. They are symbols whose shape and name placement in the alphabet and words they begin put them each at the center of what he calls a unique spiritual constellation. They are themselves holy, and they are vessels carrying within them the light of the boundless one. That, just stop and think about that for a minute. I love how he refers to God as the boundless one. This one without boundaries, this one without definition. It's so impossible to define God because he's indefinable. You can't describe. He's indescribable. He's so beyond description. There's just so much to God and so much to his creation, so much of the elements of God and the aspects of God and how he moves and what he does that is so beyond our human comprehension. There's a practice of meditation that in focusing on God and connecting with this boundless God that we know, there are times when I'll meditate just on one particular letter, let's say, and just the concept of God and how he moves and how he expresses himself through the concept of that letter. Okay, and that might sound a little strange for some of you, but I don't think it's any different than meditating on the kindness of God or the goodness of God or how God moves in certain situations or what moves God to compassion. Meditating, let's say, meditating on the letters themselves with a focus on God. I don't meditate on the letters just for the sake of going, oh my gosh, what kind of metaphysical experience can I have? It's more a matter of God, how I position myself, let's say, before the Lord. In any other way that I do a lot of contemplative prayer with the Lord. So I do a lot of meditation and just spending time in the presence of the Lord. And there are times when the Lord will reveal something. He will open something up, let's say, from a spiritual perspective. And there's times when the Lord will, let's say, give me some insight, and it may come in such a way where as I'm meditating, I might get the sense of, or I might actually have a vision of a letter, a Hebrew letter. So you know, I'll give you a for instance. There was one time when I was meditating and just spending time with the Lord in meditation, and I began to see a series of different letters. And here's the thing you need to know: I'm not fluent in Hebrew. I don't know a lot of Hebrew as far as being able to identify words and things like that. I'm not that fluent in it, okay? I study it, but I don't study it for the sake of learning a language. I study it merely for devotional purposes. So when I go into the Hebrew Bible, I'm not going with this vast education of or knowledge bank of Hebrew behind me. What I have are resources. What I have is I have a lexicon, I have an interlinear Bible, and I have software that's really great. So having said that, what I really, really appreciate is that I don't have to have that. In order to connect with the Lord, none of us needs to know Hebrew in order to connect with God. You got to know Jesus. He's our entryway to the Father. So, in order to connect with God, we just have to come, just approach the Lord, and we have access to God through Christ. But when I started studying this Hebrew, which I may get into a little bit of that today, maybe I should, because that'll help you to give you some understanding. I always wanted to learn the original languages. I wanted to learn Hebrew and I wanted to learn Greek so that I could study the scriptures. That was my main purpose behind it. And I had been praying into that for years, for decades actually. And then in 2007, actually 2006, I was introduced to a man who he had taught Hebrew at a Bible college in Chicago, where I lived at the time, and he wasn't teaching. He wasn't teaching at the college anymore. He had done a lot of different things, but he had gotten out of that and he was doing something else. He had been a pastor for a while, and he just happened to be the brother of a friend of a friend, and we all got to talking. I thought, this guy has got a bank of knowledge in him that just kind of flows out of him. You ever meet one of those people who's just, it's just a part of who they are. They can't help it. It's like, and that's who this gentleman is. And, he's just this sweet, very private individual, and, called himself a dusty old professor, and, kind of living under a rock. And, it took us a year of praying this through and getting his brother to hound him on our behalf. But finally he agreed to share with us a method of teaching that he had developed when he was teaching Bible college. And it was a way of putting tools in the hands of people who weren't in Bible college so that they could study the scriptures and so that they could dig into the Hebrew language. And it was amazing. We went on this incredible 9-month journey with this gentleman, and it really was amazing. And I don't want to get into the whole testimony of that. I think I share that in one of the episodes I did on my Through the Dalet podcast. But in a nutshell, what I learned was how to get into it, how to get into the scriptures without having to actually get into all the grammar and learning a whole bunch of stuff that, frankly, I just didn't have the wherewithal for. I mean, I'm sure that if I applied myself, I probably could, But that wasn't my goal. My goal was just simply to get into the scriptures, and this gave me the tools to do that. Now, there are a lot of courses out there now. There's a lot of stuff online. Back in the day when I started getting into this, there was nothing out there. There was absolutely nothing available online or anywhere other than going to seminary or some kind of Bible college to get this. There was nowhere. Okay, that whole Babel thing, none of that stuff was available back then. So, okay, getting back to my point was that because that was the way that I stepped into this, was so that I didn't have to have all of this other education behind me. It gave me the tools to just simply get into the Word and to go further than what I had available to me in a, let's say, in a Strong's Concordance, it's a great resource. I will never speak against Strong's Concordance, but it's limited. There's so much more that's available, that's out there. There's so much more to this than that piece. And this gave me the means to actually get into the Hebrew Bible and begin to pull out and extract a deeper level of meaning, a deeper understanding. And through this method of learning, the scriptures were just opened up to me. And I mean, I love the Word of God. My first encounters with Jesus were when he introduced himself to me as the Word of God. So as I have, over the years, this experience with God has gone further I'm stumbling over my words because I'm trying to come up with the language that I want to use to express this. But what happened for me is my devotional life took on a whole new dimension. It just expanded. I still pray. I still do all the things I've always done before. But this brought in an element that allowed me to go deeper into the Word of God and caused the Word of God in me to expand. Okay, so having said all of that, to go back to just simply meditating on the letters themselves. I believe that when you spend time just in quiet contemplation with the Lord, in quietness and stillness, that often when we come to the Lord, we come with all of our questions and we come with all of our requests and we come with a very busy mind. And we come with a very busy life, and we come with our insides are very busy and very active and engaged, and we usually want something. And what I have found over the years is if I can still my heart, if I can still my mind, and just simply come into a place of meditation and quiet contemplation with the Lord, my whole spirit and soul, I begin to relax. And peace, the peace of God that passes understanding, begins to lay hold of me, and the Lord will just wrap himself around me. My mind, and I'm not talking about, making your mind empty. I'm talking about silencing all the voices in your head. Because I know, when I first started doing, and I've been doing this a long time, but, in the beginning, it's really difficult. And there's times in life, even now, when it's really hard for me to quiet myself enough to be able to just sit in the presence of the Lord in more of a receptive mode rather than in a pound the doors of heaven and, and charge the gates kind of a thing. I mean, a lot of us are always in go mode, and I'm a very go type of person. I'm very action based. Now that I've gotten older, my action's a little slower, but for the most part, I want to be doing something. I don't like being idle. So, it's kind of a contradiction of my nature to just sit in absolute silence. But I can remember back in the day when, it was probably during the charismatic renewal. So I was very young. I was probably early 20s, late teens, early 20s. And I remember going to these prayer groups, different prayer groups, where we would and it was a leftover from prior generations, was a practice that some of the older folks did, and I found it rather annoying in the beginning, until I began to realize the value of it. And they used to have what they called these tarrying meetings. And to tarry, Tarry, to tarry just simply means to wait. Well, it's not easy to wait, but it's also harder to wait in quietness and stillness. But here's what happens. You get into these tarrying meetings, and of course my insides are going a mile a minute. And of course, because I'm young at the time, it's like, oh my goodness, you can't sit still for a minute. So it took a while. It took a while, and it took a lot of practice. But something happened one day, because I'm like, all you're doing is you're sitting in this room, everybody's sitting with their eyes closed, nobody's saying anything, and you don't make a sound. There's barely even any movement. And I remember sitting in this one meeting where we were tarrying before the Lord. And I don't know how long we had been there. It seemed like days, okay? It really did. It just seemed like an eternity. But we're in this meeting, and everybody's quiet, and it's absolute silence, and there's no coughing. Nobody's breaking the silence. And when you're young and you're new to this, it's uncomfortable, and the silence is almost unnerving, and you want things to just move on. But if you allow that discomfort to just quiet itself, and if you don't give in to that by rustling through papers or digging through your purse to find something to do while everyone else is quiet, if you actually practice being quiet, and as we're sitting there, so in this one particular meeting, I decided, okay, I'm going to make the best of this. I'm actually going to focus on the Lord, which I could do, but not for as long as these folks could wait a long time. And, you wait 2 or 3 minutes in silence, and there are people getting nervous. This group, there's nobody moving. They're just sitting in absolute silence. And I'll bet you 30 to 45 minutes went by, and there was nothing. Nobody's moving. Nobody's saying anything. But so I decided that, okay, I'm going to do this. So my eyes are closed, and I'm trying to focus on the Lord. And I thought, okay, well, there's nothing going on out here, so I might as well just sit here and make the best of it. And after a while, you could even sense this subtle shift. And it was very subtle at first. There was just this warmth that sort of came in, and it was kind of a comforting warmth. And I remember there was just this peace. And it was almost like a blanket. And it was as if this incredible, comforting peace just settled on the whole place. And it wasn't like a kind of a peace where you want to fall asleep, but it was very relaxing. And all of those, all the worries and all the fears and all the stuff, all the junk that had been going on in my head was quieted. And internally, I felt at peace. And probably for the first time in my life, because like I said, I was young. So, teenagers are not always internally at peace, okay? Even back in the day, we weren't. More so now. But this incredible peace came over me. And there was a sense of, I knew this was not just affecting me, that it was affecting others as well. And so as I'm just in this place, and I'm letting this peace just have its way, because it just felt so good. It just felt so good. I was so relaxed, and it wasn't just, oh, this is a really good feeling. There was this sense in the midst of it of, oh, wow, I can actually begin to feel something was being communicated to me, and it was like, it was love. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is really incredible. This is amazing. And the Lord began to just simply minister to me in areas that I really deeply needed to be ministered to. I had never felt love like that before. I had never felt peace like that before. Even when I got saved. I mean, I had had some pretty incredible experiences up until that point. But I think this was the first time that I was really experiencing something very deep and very profound internally. And it changed me. It dynamically changed me. And what I learned through that experience was that if I could come before the Lord and quiet my heart and just not come with all my petitions and not come with, but just simply come and spend time with the Lord and desire His presence and just long to be with Him, I just came with a longing heart. I just, to just sit there, and I just began to meditate and to think about God. And like I said, as I did, everything began to transform. And it just was amazing. And like I said, this transformed my life, because after that, I began to pursue that not only within these tarrying groups, but also in my private devotional life. And because up until that point, like I said, I'm probably a teenager, so my devotional life at that point included reading the Word and praying. Okay, so it was prayer and reading the Word, and prayer and reading the Word, prayer and reading the Word, and prayer and reading the Word, and that was pretty much it. So that was all I knew. That was all I knew to do, was to read the Word and pray. And I would receive things from the Lord when I would pray and read the Word. So, this was very different for me, to just simply spend time in the presence of the Lord and to meditate. And so the whole concept of meditation came in for me. And here's the thing. The meditation becomes a doorway. It becomes a Dalet. It becomes a way of entry into the presence of God. So when I started learning the Hebrew and started getting into this and realized that one of the practices, and this is, it's an old Jewish practice that, there's some that are still doing it, where they actually meditate. They'll meditate on a specific letter, or even sometimes just an aspect of a letter. Sometimes they'll just meditate on the form of the letter, what the letter actually just simply looks like. Or they'll meditate on, its placement within the alphabet. So we'll take the Dalet, for instance. The Dalet is the fourth letter in the Hebrew alphabet. And the Dalet is, it has a horizontal line and a vertical line. So if you picture a doorway, okay, with the lintel over the top and the doorpost coming down one side. That's the Dalet, okay? Now, the previous letter, the letter just before the Dalet, is the Hebrew letter Gimel. And a Gimel kind of looks like a man running, okay? And the concept within the Gimel is that the Gimel is someone chasing after someone to perform a good deed. So the Gimel, in essence, is running after the Dalet. So the poor Dalet, you have, the Gimel is a benefactor. It's someone who has something they want to impart to someone else. So they're chasing after this Dalet in order to bless them in some capacity. So the Dalet is the receiver of the blessing. So the Dalet is the beneficiary. So, stop and meditate upon that for a minute. It's like, oh, wow. And now think about that in the concept and in the context of our relationship with God. God is the benefactor. He's the one who's always bringing blessing. And we are the beneficiaries of that blessing. That's one aspect of meditating just simply on the position of the letter Dalet within the context of the alphabet. That's just letter placement. But when we know, when we get a deeper understanding of the letters, and that we begin to see things differently. I remember my mom conveying something. She had a vision when my sister had also come to our Hebrew class, and so she had learned some of this, and she was meeting with friends at her house, and they had a home group that met once a week, and they would just get together and meditate on the letters, and they would do some studying together. And my mom lived with my sister, so she was, she would often participate in these groups. So mom's sitting there one day, and she was meditating on, they were learning the alphabet, and they had only gotten to the Gimel. And so the Gimel being the third letter. So the first letter is Aleph, the second letter is Beit, the third letter is Gimel, and then there's the Dalet. And so my mom is meditating on all of this and just trying to understand it, trying to remember it, because this was all new for her. And so the Aleph basically represents God, and the Beit represents a house or your heart, and the Gimel is this benefactor, this little man running. And so my mom has a vision of God, and she's seeing this aspect of God, and she begins to see him as a man running, and she sees him running towards something, and she's not quite sure what it is that she's seeing. Okay, she knows it's God, and he's running toward something or someone, and then she sees this house, and then the vision kind of focuses in on the feet of the runner. And she can see the pace at which this guy, now it's just a guy running. She sees this guy running, and she sees this house, and she sees the door on the house is open. But the door on the house that she's seeing is beginning to close. And this guy is running like at full speed, and then he just sticks his foot. He gets up to the house just in time, just before the door fully closes. he gets up to the house and he sticks his foot in the door to keep the door from closing all the way. That's the end of the vision. Now, mind you, they had only done Aleph, Bet, and Gimel up until this point. Mom knew nothing about the Dalet. She knew nothing about the door. She had no clue what was coming next because they had only gotten to this Dalet, to the Gimel. So she didn't know any more than that. All she knew was Aleph, Bet, Gimel. And this is this amazing revelation. So she's sitting with this, and and of course my sister's the one who's teaching this little group. And so when they're done with their meditation exercises, they each share, did you get something? Did you see something? Do you have a vision? Whatever. So my mom shares her vision. Blows my sister's mind because my sister says, Mom, the next letter is Dalet, which is a door. And of course, Mom thought that was interesting, but as my mother was seeing this vision, the Lord was communicating to her his relentless love for us, and how even when our hearts are beginning to close toward him, he will get his foot in the door. That he is the benefactor. He is going to come with a blessing. Even when he sees that our hearts are beginning to close toward him in some way, he will come and chase toward us even more so. That the one who is relentless in his love toward us will come and chase us down, and he will get his foot in the door in order to bless us. So why bring that up? Why bring all of this up now? In this podcast about the Dalet? Well, because the Dalet is so much more than just a letter in the Hebrew alphabet. It conveys a lot. And, I'm not just into the letters and that because I'm into the letters. I'm into God. And, my heart is toward the Lord. And I want God. I want the authentic. I don't want, I don't like, I'm very practical in a lot of ways. And I'm one of those people I'm not really interested in a lot of fluff. Don't blow air up my skirt. And don't add a lot of hoopla. Don't add to it. Don't try to package this differently. Just don't add to the packaging. God just in and of himself is amazing. He is incredible. He is the God of all comfort. He is merciful and loving and kind and good. And as we get to know God, he reveals more and more of himself to us. I just simply found that through quieting my heart before the Lord and becoming the beneficiary rather than the benefactor, I position myself in such a way as I can receive from the Lord. Now, I bring my offering to God, and I offer up praise and thanksgiving and prayer to the Lord. But there's times when we need to become the beneficiary. The only way we can receive anything from the Lord is when we put ourselves in the position of being the poor Dalet, the Dalet who needs something from someone greater than, whose resources are boundless, whose love is everlasting. I need eternal love in my life. We all do. I want eternal forgiveness. I want eternal loving kindness. I want eternal mercy. And the only place I get that is from God. The only place I'm going to receive that is from him. But I come in a place of lack. I come from this place, this earthly place of my resources are not boundless. They're limited. My capacity is limited. I don't have endless resources, and I don't have a vast capacity. I don't have endless capacity. But God does. So when I position myself as the beneficiary and realize in this relationship between me and God, guess who is in a better position to bless? God is. I'm always the beneficiary. Even when I bring an offering to him, even when I offer up praise or thanksgiving or worship or prayer, or just simply I offer up my time, I offer up my resources. You know, there's that expression, you can't outgive God. Well, I'm not trying to outgive God, but rather I'll give in response to the fact that he's giving to me. It's and I forget exactly where the verse is at. It's in John 3, I believe, but it says, I know it's in 1 John 4:19, and we love because he first loved us. You know, my response as someone who comes and brings an offering, let's say, I'm doing that in response to the fact that God has been my greatest benefactor. Everything I have in my life, I owe to God. My life, any sense of well-being, any blessing I have in this life, I owe to God. Because God is the one. He is my benefactor. He's the one who has done all these great and wonderful things in my life. And he has led me and guided me and been with me every single day. And how can I not then respond in like kind and just express that gratitude and thankfulness? So, you know, I can only love him because he first loved me. I can only extend myself toward him because he extended himself toward me. That's the benefactor. And me as the beneficiary, I get to sit in this place of just simply being the Dalet. I am the benefactor of all of God's goodness, of all of his kindness, of all of his mercy, of all of his loving care, his generosity, his goodness, the joy, the blessing, the peace, all of it. I'm the recipient. I'm the Dalet, the benefactor of all of that goodness that God comes running toward us to give us. Well, I hope that in some way has touched your heart today. I pray that, you know, in some way the Lord has touched you, ministered to your heart. I pray that the Lord will come and chase you down with blessing, that he will overtake you with his goodness, and that you will see the goodness and the kindness of the Lord, that he will be like that gimel, like a man running after you to perform a good deed, the one who chases you down to bring you a blessing. So I just say to you today, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. This is Betty with Beyond the Dalet. Shalom.